This is CBN NewsWatch.
And thank you so much for joining us. I'm Efrem Graham. We begin with 2018, a robust year for the U.S. economy, but our worst times ahead. Stocks are dropping and Wall Street is nervous. Monday, the Dow dropped more than 500 points, and for the month, it has dropped 7.5%. So far, it is the worst December on Wall Street since the Great Depression. Investors and economists are pessimistic about 2019.
In reality, if anything's going to happen, it's going to happen this week. From Wall Street to Main Street, the concept of recession is certainly coming back into conversations.
And Gary Lane is following this story for us today. So why has the market dropped more than 7% this month?
Well, let's just look at yesterday when it dropped 500 points. The reason for that, over the weekend, you had a judge who basically ruled Obamacare unconstitutional. There were concerns in healthcare stocks about that. In addition to that, there's concerns on Wednesday that the Federal Reserve is going to raise interest rates. Beyond that, just for December alone, slowing economy around the world and also concerns about the way things are going.
How's the president responding?
Well, the president is responding with this. He tweeted out, he said, it's incredible that with a very strong dollar and virtually no inflation, the outside world blowing up around us, Paris burning, China way down, the Fed is even considering yet another interest rate hike. He's very concerned about the Fed constantly raising interest rates. He said as things are going well, that just slows things down.
How about the average American? What do they think?
Average Americans are very optimistic, Ephraim. 51% are hopeful for the future. That's a Fox News poll. 44% not so hopeful, but 53% say 2018 was a good year for them.
All right, Gary, thank you so much for following the story today. Here's a quick look at some other headlines we're working on for you today in the CBN newsroom. There is a fight to keep a cross on the grounds of a Maryland War Memorial. The American Legion is taking its battle all the way to the U.S. Supreme Court after a lower court ruled the cross violates the Constitution. The group's attorney filed the briefs with the court asking it to preserve the 93-year-old memorial that honors fallen World War I soldiers. Colorado baker Jack Phillips will be heading back to court today, this time for refusing to bake a cake that celebrates a male-to-female gender transition. The first lawsuit by the Colorado Civil Rights Commission was because he didn't bake a gay wedding cake. That case went all the way to the U.S. Supreme Court. The Alliance Defending Freedom represents Phillips and say yet again the commission is violating his constitutional freedoms. A Wisconsin judge has ruled that a Green Bay City non-discrimination ordinance cannot be applied to churches and other faith-based groups. It would have labeled them as places of public accommodation, and they would have been considered discriminating against transgender and gay individuals if they preach that God determines gender and prohibits homosexuality. Now, you can find more on these stories and others throughout the day at cbnnews.com. Popular Bible study teacher Beth Moore is an abuse survivor and spoke at the Evangelical Summit on Abuse last week. Our Heather Sells talked with her about her story, advice in her early ministry from another leader not to share it, and why she decided not to follow that advice.
She was looking out for me, but she said to me, Beth, people are not ready for that. You will sink the ministry that you might have had if this becomes any part of your prominent story, of your profile story. What I knew was that I could not be true to the ministry that God had called me to. It was too big. It was too big in my life, and it shaped too much of me. It shaped too much of the reason why I had so few boundaries and so much chaos in my adolescence and such a rough road, which then led to why I truly came to love Jesus and love the scriptures as much as I did. So for me, I had to, because my story, at least in my view, did not make sense to tell people without that piece, because there was so much that had happened that had hinged from it.
I spoke with Heather about the conference and this difficult issue facing the church and why that's the case, plus how another well-known Christian leader disclosed he too was a victim of abuse. It seems like Beth Moore in general supported this summit.
Right. She was really careful, and it was really interesting because here you have really the first high-profile summit on this issue, and there were survivors in particular who on social media were critiquing the summit. So Moore was saying, hey, I think it's a good first step. It wasn't comprehensive. There absolutely, though, were critics on social media who are survivors who are saying, we don't think you did a good job. You didn't have enough survivors up there. You had some survivors linked to organizations that haven't fully dealt with this. So, a little bit of a mixed bag out there. And I think Moore was trying to be careful in supporting it, but not unconditionally.
Absolutely. Was there anything that stood out to you in her talk or others?
Yes, she was so bold in her talk. And one of the things she said is she thinks that people in the church sometimes are hesitant to call out abuse because of sexual sin in their own life. And I thought that was a really interesting point and perhaps a reason why the church hasn't been quicker. And she also talked about how we're all responsible if we know of abuse taking place. And I thought that was really compelling to really makes everyone think about, what do I know and who am I responsible to?
Absolutely. Max Lucado is one speaker who acknowledged his abuse publicly and did it for the first time. What kind of impact do you think that made?
Right. Well, in the auditorium at the time, he and another speaker, Kelly Rosati, announced publicly for the first time that they were survivors. And you could hear people saying, wow, and people really were surprised, I think. And I think in particular for Max Lucado, he's so well known. His ministry has been so well known for so many years, but he hasn't shared this part of his story. And he, of course, is a male speaking to abuse, which we don't always hear that side too. So I think he hopefully will embolden more survivors, encourage more survivors, and also just encourage the conversation as a whole that we can talk about this. He didn't share a lot of details, though.
Any other things stand out about the conference itself, this being the very first time that evangelicals are addressing this on such a scale?
Well, right, on this, and that's a good point to note on this scale. There have definitely been other conferences on abuse, but this was a higher profile level, if you will. And I think people aren't sure exactly where to go next. And there's so many ways to address abuse, be it prevention or be it dealing with perpetrators or comforting survivors. So there's a lot of tasks out there that I think the church as a whole needs to think about.
All right. Well, certainly a blessing to see them at least taking this step, people watching, and many people opening up and sharing their stories of abuse. It will certainly help and bless others. We know that we overcome by the word of our testimony and the blood of the Lamb. So this was certainly testimony indeed.
Absolutely.
Dr. James Dobson is calling on Ohio Governor John Kasich to sign the state's historic heartbeat bill. He sent a letter to the governor to protect the sanctity of life for the unborn. He said in 2017 alone, 20,893 babies died as a result of an abortion in Ohio. He wrote, "How can we let this happen in our nation, whose very founding stood on the eternal principles of being made in our Creator's image and having our unalienable rights bestowed by Him? The most precious and basic right is the right to life." The bill would be one of the most restrictive abortion laws in the nation. Kasich vetoed another heartbeat bill back in 2016, saying it was contrary to the U.S. Supreme Court ruling on abortion. Airbnb says it reports that it would not implement its policy to ban listings in Judea and Samaria are inaccurate. The Israeli newspaper Haaretz reported the reversal after Israel's tourism minister met the vice president of Airbnb in Israel. That policy said it would not list Jewish homes, only Arab homes in the West Bank because of the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. In an earlier interview, one expert said it's not fair.
Airbnb's decision is a clearly bigoted and discriminatory policy, which is trying to create a no-Jew zone in Judea and Samaria. They're partnering with the Palestinian Authority, whose clear goal is that Jews should not be able to have homes anywhere in Judea and Samaria, because Jewish homes in Judea and Samaria are the only kinds of homes that cannot be listed on Airbnb.
Many said the ban is anti-Semitic, and one group has filed a lawsuit against Airbnb. In recent years, the church in the Middle East has endured some dark days, but some believe the lives of believers today are reflecting the heroes and heroines of the past in the place where Christianity was born. Chris Mitchell brings us that story now from Jerusalem.
Across the Middle East, Christians and the church have suffered terrible persecution, yet there is still optimism here.
I see the church is standing and standing strong with all of the difficulties and with all of the atrocities and all the persecution.
Egyptian-born Yvette Isaac believes that's because they're continuing the testimony of the early believers.
I really believe every day a new page of the book of Acts is being written.
And Isaac wants the church in the West to know what's happening here.
There are brothers and sisters, Christian brothers and sisters who are living there. And if it wasn't for them, first, we will not hear about Christianity in the West. Because of the church in the Middle East, Christianity spread all over the world.
Yet she says the pressure on Christians has been enormous.
That's where it's all started. And the enemy's focus is to destroy it. The enemy's focus is to empty the Middle East from Christianity. So he's putting all of this pressure. And we have seen all kinds of pressure under the people.
Isaac hosts a television program to the Middle East, and she believes Christian media can play a big role to help Christians.
The church needs to know the truth. The Christian media needs to air and to show the world the stories from there. If we just depend on the secular media, we will get what's their agenda for the world to hear. But awareness is very important. That's why we have many clips of Christian people that they suffer and they tell their stories.
One of the stories she tells are the Christians who suffered under ISIS.
We go to Iraq and to Syria, and we go to these places, and we try to empower the girls that they came out of captivity. Christians in Syria and in Iraq, they don't want to speak too much. Probably it's a fear, but when we go there, they open up, and they feel like they can open up and tell us their stories. So we share their stories after their permission to the world.
She tells one story of an Orthodox priest and an evangelical pastor.
An Orthodox priest told me, when there was no water and there are only few drops of water left, I would rather divide it with the evangelical pastor, because I know if we both live, we're going to be more powerful together. If I live and he dies, I'm weaker.
She hopes each part of the body of Christ will do their part.
What am I called to do? Especially in the Western world. The Western church needs to understand the importance of the existing of Christians in the Middle East at this time.
Chris Mitchell, CBN News, Jerusalem.
Anne Graham Lott says God is using her bout with cancer to give her a message for Israel. She says she has always believed her life was entwined with Israel. She wrote in her latest blog, "I was born 1 week to the day after her rebirth. We are both 70 years old. Could it be that God has given me a message for her that I am living out in my own experience? This is what I seem to see." Lott wrote she received the message after a time of prayer and meditating on Jeremiah 1:13, which says, "The word of the Lord came to me again. What do you see?" She says the example of Hosea, Jeremiah, and Isaiah back her belief that God has his spokespersons live out the message he gives them for the people. She wrote, "The warning I feel deep within is that Israel is in danger of a surprise attack in this, her 70th year." She also wrote, "And this is the message God has placed on my heart for you and me, for God's people. It is time once again to pray for the peace of Jerusalem." Now you can go to cbnnews.com for the full article, which includes a link to that blog. Coming up, a church split that brings an end to generations of faith traditions in one part of the world. Stay with us.
When you give, smiles grow bigger. When you care, homes are happier. When you comfort, the hurt goes away. When we all come together to love, miracles happen.
Hello, I'm Terry Newsom. Did you know there are more than 148 million orphans in the world today? 148 million. But it was 3 little girls that taught me about the plight of orphans. My husband and I spent nearly a month immersed in the daily activities of a Ukrainian orphanage as we waited to adopt 3 sisters. I saw firsthand the utter loneliness, the pain of rejection, and the overwhelming desire to be loved. That experience changed me forever. And out of it grew a ministry from my heart called Orphan's Promise. Today, we're helping orphans and vulnerable children in more than 50 countries worldwide. Thousands of children are now in safe homes. They're being educated, and they're learning life skills. I'm asking you to join with me and become family to these children. Will you call the number on your screen right now? Because every child deserves a chance to be happy.
Hello? Is this thing on? Hey, kids, do you love games? And do you love discovering things? Well, do ya?
Then you're gonna love this. It's the new free Superbook Kids Bible app. You can play games, watch videos, find answers to your questions, and a whole lot more. The new Superbook Kids Bible app. Free downloads available on iTunes and Google Play now.
Ukrainian Orthodox leaders approved the creation of a unified church independent of the Russian Orthodox Church in Moscow. It could raise tensions further with Russia. Ukraine's President Petro Poroshenko said it will be a church that is free from the influence of Russian leader Vladimir Putin and the head of the Russian Orthodox Church. Poroshenko stressed Ukraine had seized spiritual independence, which can be linked to political independence. Now, I spoke with CBN's Dale Hurd about the move and what this church split means and what kind of reaction he expects from Russia. In the West, we have church splits a lot of times, and of course, it's always unfortunate. But why is this such a big deal in Ukraine and Russia?
Because in my opinion, it's not so much about faith, it's about religion and how that's intertwined in the Eastern Orthodox world with patriotism, especially in Russia, which wanted to think of itself as sort of, reviving the Russian Empire, and the Russian Orthodox Church would be like Rome, the home of, the center of Orthodox belief in the Orthodox world. And that's all been shattered now by Ukraine doing this, not only doing it, but really sticking it in Putin's face and saying, this is about Putin and he's why we're doing this.
Well, speaking of Vladimir Putin, do you think he will let this go, or should we be expecting him now to make a move?
I don't think he's ever let anything go. And so, no, I don't think he will let this go. And we should all be a little nervous because there are reports by Ukraine, they're saying this, and the West hasn't corroborated it, that there is a buildup on their border of Russian forces, tanks and troops, and a part of Ukraine is, has been engulfed in a civil war and has people who are loyal to Moscow. And some have always wondered if Russia would cross the border and grab that territory. I don't know what Putin's going to do, but as I said, he never really lets anything go.
This is true. Dale Hurd reporting for us. Thank you so much. And no, we know this is not the end of this story.
No.
Still ahead, untangling a big misunderstanding with the founding of a father's writings about the separation of church and state. Stay with us for this story.
Parents, the Superbook Bible app is a great way to get your child reading the Bible, because in today's busy world, we can use some help. The free Superbook Bible app has fun stuff your kids will love. They'll have a blast learning the Bible, playing great games, watching cool videos, discovering heroes in the Bible. They'll have fun while they learn God's Word. The Superbook Kids Bible app, available now.
Life. It's meant to be lived fully. Jesus said it. I came to give you life. Life to the fullest. Life in your family. Life in your finances. Life in your body, mind, and spirit. Life in your everyday. At CBN.com, we're taking what Jesus said seriously. We're here to help you discover life. Life. Live it fully. CBN.com.
We had 4 jobs that didn't go right. But, we didn't waver in our faith.
That's when God put on my heart that we needed to do the well.
Within a couple of days, we got an insurance refund check that we had no idea was coming.
And here we are, this year, it's just boom.
You go out and help other people and you get rewarded for it.
Get Pat Robertson's latest teaching, Miraculous Blessings.
When Thomas Jefferson wrote a wall of separation between church and state, he meant government cannot tell Americans how to worship or even to worship at all. Today, those words have been twisted, often to prevent Americans from practicing their faith in some cases. CBN's Paul Strand reports it was never intended to mean to pit God against government.
America's Constitution resides here in the National Archives. Its Bill of Rights protects freedoms such as speech, the press, and religion. It says Congress shall make no law respecting an establishment of religion. Today's prevailing opinion believes that means government and God can have nothing to do with each other, thus creating a high wall separating church and state. But what did the founding fathers who wrote it actually mean?
When the founders talked about separation of church and state, they had a historical context that we really lack.
Reverend Eddie Hyatt, author of Pilgrims and Patriots.
Church and state was merged together, and the church used the power of the state to enforce its doctrines and practices.
He says certain governments used deadly force against dissenters who wanted to worship in their own way.
Those people were persecuted, burned at the stake. Some had their tongues cut out. The founders did not want that kind of Christianity.
And so that's the context they have of separation of church and state. It was never the church taking over the state, it's always the state taking over the church.
Author Jerry Newcomb, who wrote the book that made America, says the founders opposed such force.
They didn't want to have a national established Church of America like you have the Church of England, forcing people to believe something that they didn't believe in.
Thomas Jefferson wrote to worried pastors in a famous 1802 letter assuring them government wouldn't interfere with their faith.
Because there's a wall of separation between church and state. And so the way he used it is, guys, the government's not going to stop religious activities.
Then almost 150 years later, more liberal justices and judges began to interpret that to mean government had to wall off any touch of faith on any public institution or the people in it.
William Federer, author of the daily American Minute.
And that's when they began to reinterpret that phrase to say, no, we're going to get faith and God and everything out.
Such as the 1980 Supreme Court ruling that kicked the Ten Commandments out of public schools.
They said if the Ten Commandments were on the schoolroom wall, the children might read them, meditate on them, venerate them, and obey them.
We got to make sure that kid doesn't say God at graduation. You can't let a kid pray over their lunch.
Hyatt says the founders would be distressed by these rulings.
To ban Bible reading and prayer from public schools, remove crosses and Ten Commandment displays from public places.
Attorney Jeremy Dice fights for religious rights.
When the government tells you what you can believe and what you cannot believe, that is a significant loss in our freedom.
It's ironic that judges will say, well, we have to maintain separation of church and state. They're quoting from Jefferson, and Jefferson in the Declaration said all men are endowed by their creator with certain inalienable rights. Here's Jefferson acknowledging he believed in a creator, and they're using his phrase out of context to prohibit a creator.
In that same letter, Jefferson showed where he stands.
At the end of it, Thomas Jefferson says, will you please pray to God for me, and I will pray to God for you. He violates the separation of church and state in the very letter that gave us the phrase.
And right after he wrote it,
President Jefferson left the White House to go to the United States Capitol at the time to do what? To go to church that Sunday.
In the Capitol.
In the United States Capitol buildings.
The U.S. Supreme Court has more than 50 depictions of the Ten Commandments in its own building.
George Washington was sworn in on the Holy Bible. He said, so help me God, which was the common way of taking oaths. George Washington even leaned down and kissed the Holy Bible.
They did not want a national church, but they wanted God in all of their proceedings.
So, you know, if their idea was, well, there should be no reference to God in our government, then the founders, you know, absolutely were schizophrenic. They absolutely did not mean the separation of God and government.
As Newcomb put it, while the founders made religious freedom a priority, they certainly did not intend to make America into some sort of secular wasteland. Paul Strand, CBN News, reporting from the National Archives.
And still ahead, we've got a Tuesday Tweetable just for you and a season's greeting from one of television's favorite personalities. Stay with us. There's much more of CBN NewsWatch coming up right after this.
When you give, smiles grow bigger. When you care, homes are happier. When you comfort, the hurt goes away. When we all come together to love, miracles happen.
Hello, I'm Terry Newsom. Did you know there are more than 148 million orphans in the world today? 148 million. But it was 3 little girls that taught me about the plight of orphans. My husband and I spent nearly a month immersed in the daily activities of a Ukrainian orphanage as we waited to adopt 3 sisters. I saw firsthand the utter loneliness, the pain of rejection, and the overwhelming desire to be loved. That experience changed me forever. And out of it grew a ministry from my heart called Orphan's Promise. Today, we're helping orphans and vulnerable children in more than 50 countries worldwide. Thousands of children are now in safe homes. They're being educated, and they're learning life skills. I'm asking you to join with me and become family to these children. Will you call the number on your screen right now? Because every child deserves a chance to be happy.
Hello? Is this thing on? Hey, kids, do you love games? And do you love discovering things? Well, do ya?
Then you're gonna love this. It's the new free Superbook Kids Bible app. You can play games, watch videos, find answers to your questions, and a whole lot more. The new Superbook Kids Bible app. Free downloads available on iTunes and Google Play now.
Christmas is one of the most wonderful times of year, but it can also be a challenge, especially for those struggling with depression, whether it's from the loss of a loved one, the extra financial burden, or even worrying about weight gain. Alora Johnson has some help. She is talking with Dr. Crystal Moore about making the most out of this time of year and celebrating Jesus, who, of course, is what the season is all about. The famous fixer-uppers decked the halls of their home for Christmas. Joanna Gaines blogged about it, saying that they normally decorate their dining room with one tree, but have a family tree in their den. However, with the addition of their newborn son, Crew, they changed the family tradition just a little bit by moving the tree to the master bedroom, because that's where they tend to gather as a family to be with their son, Crew. Well, she said it's a change, but she writes, wherever you find yourself this season, whether it's amidst change or right in the center of your same beloved family traditions, I hope you'll embrace it all with renewed perspective. And she ended that post with, Merry Christmas. Well, right now, it is time for your Tuesday Tweetable. And here's a message I hope you will post, tag, tweet, and share with others. Remember this, Christmas is never about the presents under the tree, but it is always about the presence of God in the hearts of man. Remember, Jesus was born to die and to rise yet again, the ultimate sacrifice to give us the ultimate gift. And that gift is salvation. With that word, I encourage you to make this a terrific Tuesday and enjoy every single minute of the holiday season. Well, that will do it for this edition of CBN NewsWatch. Remember that you can always find more of our exclusive coverage of the issues you care most about, and you can find it at cbnnews.com. We'd love to know what you think about the stories you've seen here today. You can do that by emailing newswatch@cbn.com. And of course, you can always reach out and touch us on Facebook, on Twitter, as well as Instagram. Hope you'll join us again right here next time. Have a terrific Tuesday, everybody. We'll see you right back here tomorrow.